I'm a fishing guide. I pretty much use public lands almost every day. In the summertime, for sure, every day for income.
I live in Cody. First moved to Wyoming, it's more than 30 years ago. So Wyoming isn't where I started out, but I'm pretty certain it's where I'll finish up.
Life, I worked as a newspaper man, trying to inform people about things like this. And after I changed careers, I worked for 6 years with the Bureau of Land Management as a public affairs officer, trying to inform people and educate people. And I worked for 14 years with the U.S. Forest Service as a public affairs officer, trying to inform people and educate people. I retired in 2005.
It's a huge privilege to live in a state where you have so much public land and you can do a lot of the stuff that you want to do. You know, I've lived in other places, and now when I go back east, there's nothing there for me.
If you look at public lands, they're very diverse and they have many uses. You can look at them from a straight economic standpoint. They bring in a lot of money to the federal government and to the states and the counties and so forth, through timbering, through mineral royalties and so forth, grazing. They also provide some intangibles that I think are equally as important.
A friend of mine who passed away not long ago said the sound of mountain rivers is soothing to his soul. He suffered from depression. He felt something there, something apart from modern society. He felt a connection that was soothing, helped him rebalance his life and reconnect with what was important.
We need to be able to go out and view the Grand Canyon or climb the peaks of the Wind River Mountains or fish the streams or float the streams or backpack or whatever.
You know, it changed my whole life coming out to Wyoming. It made my life a lot better having the freedom and the space, you know, to enjoy the stuff that I like the most.
In the 80s, the first information that I ever remember concerning the transfer of public lands was part of an effort throughout the West called the Sagebrush Rebellion. Part of the Sagebrush Rebellion was that if they had grazing rights, you know, if they had a grazing lease, that the land should be given to them because they've had it for a certain number of years. And recently they've come back as a lot of wealthy and influential people who stand to go from enormously wealthy to mega wealthy, if they can push this type of legislation through, are doing the modern 2016 version of the Sagebrush Rebellion. For instance, the platform committee at the Republican National Convention this year pushed a platform that includes the passage of all federal lands, or nearly all federal lands, into the hands of private landowners.
I think we ask the wrong question sometimes. Sometimes we ask the question, why do we have public lands? I think we ought to reframe that question. What is the alternative to having public lands? Should we have people own all the lands to where the rest of us couldn't use it? In that case, a lot of people with a lot of money would probably own most of the land.
I can't really see a point to giving up, you know, the amount of public land that we have. You know, a lot of this land, I mean, you know, guys that have money, have big ranches, and they do fine on it, and other people, you know, block it off.
Here in Wyoming, the legislature is trying to facilitate and kind of pave the way for the transfer of federal lands to the state of Wyoming. So the state of Wyoming could dispose of them how they saw fit. And they say, well, we would never sell them. They would never be transferred into private hands. And there's a bill currently underway. The legislature wants to get on the ballot to amend the Wyoming Constitution in a way that would allow them to take possession of these federal lands. They're pushing it as a means to protect those lands, but that's really deceitful, and they're not being honest, because the land's protected right now. The only reason the state of Wyoming wants to push through this amendment to the state's constitution is to gain possession of that land for their own purposes.
Sometimes people talk about public lands as belonging to the government. The government is us. It's not the senators in Washington or the president or the House of Representatives. The government is us. We are the owners of the public lands. We are the ones who should have the say how they're used.
I would like to see things kind of stay the same as they are. I think there's a kind of almost a good balance. I mean, there's some private land, but there's plenty of public land out there in Wyoming.
Hindsight's 20/20, and so states who are now saying that somehow they have a claim to public lands within their boundaries, if they'll look at the enabling legislation, I think that most of them, if not all of them here in the West, will find Congress required them to specifically disclaim forever any claim that they had over public lands.
The problem is, as I see it, we don't know what would happen because each state, I'm sure, would treat them differently. There might be some states that would manage the public lands maybe in a decent way. We don't know.
In Wyoming, it's a tough call. I mean, nobody wants to see the land, privatized. There are certain situations that I have seen where private land works to an advantage.
Should we turn it over to the states? I don't think so, because the states don't really have public lands in the sense the U.S. government has public lands. There's differences.
If you look at the way that states have managed their own state lands, either by liquidating them or by just not allowing the public to access them, in most states, you have to have permission from the state land office in order to use state land. It's crazy. It's like, well, that land belongs to everyone in the state. Yes, but it's managed by the state land office, and it's managed as if it were private land.
The lands that were given to the states to manage, for instance, the school trust lands, they decide how to use them. And they're not public lands in the sense of allowing us to use them in the same sense that the government public lands are. So those managed by the Forest Service and Park Service and BLM and Fish and Wildlife Service and so forth.
I think if the public land went away, we would move, actually.
Part of the real value of public lands isn't just the land, it's the wildlife and the water and things like the redwoods and the timber and the clean air and the scenery, those intangible things that are so important to us.
They're on South Pass. I felt a connection to those people, and it looked just the same as it did. That would not happen without public lands. Someone would decide to put in the South Pass shopping mall and casino. And there's places that are appropriate for shopping malls and casinos, but not every place is appropriate for that.
I think some people from outside Wyoming or Cody value the public lands maybe more than we do as locals. For one reason, they live in those concrete jungles and they never get to climb a mountain or fish a stream or backpack, and they come out here and they're thrilled when they get on public lands and can see some of the scenery they have and so forth. I mean, can you imagine what it's like to a kid that grows up in New York to see the Grand Canyon or to backpack in the Wind River Mountains or to see the redwoods in California. These are wonderful. The public lands don't just belong to the locals, they belong to everybody.
You know, the tourism part of Wyoming is the second most important industry in the state, besides minerals, gas, and oil, and coal. For instance, in fishing, a fish that's released is worth 100 times more than a fish that goes in the freezer to the state, because people come back year after year and stay in the nicest hotels, eat at the nicest restaurants, and go out and enjoy that public land. Whereas if there was no fish, you would lose all that.
I have a friend who grew up in the United States, and he lives in Austria now. And a number of years ago, he came to Cody to visit with me. Got him out fly fishing, got him up on some of our rivers and streams, and all the places that I fish are public areas. Anyway, and he had such a fun time. He came back the next summer and did it again. And about the third summer, he says, "There's streams over in Austria. I'm gonna go back there and do some fly fishing when I'm in Austria." He talked to a fly shop over there. You have to get this permit from the government, then you have to buy a trespass fee from a fishing club that owns or leases a certain stretch of river, a mile or a mile and a half. He says that he worked it out, and it works out to about $500 a day to go fishing. And of course, here you just buy a license and head down to the river, as long as it has public access to it.
There are people who may not be consciously trying to eliminate everything but because of their short-sightedness, or their only interest in their own selves or their own industry or whatever, will harm the resources on our public lands.
Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren. I want to leave them the heritage of public land so that they can know that they have somewhere to go where they can sit by the mountain stream, hopefully with their fly rod next to them, and just listen to the beauty of the water, listen to the wind in the trees, listen to birds chirping, listen to all the sounds that are in a forest, and know what it's like to hear the sounds that humans have known for millennia, and reconnect with their primal past, so to speak.
I grew up in the mountains. I began fishing when I was 6 years old, backpacking, going out with my brothers, hunting, enjoying the public lands. There are memories there that mean more to me, that have enriched my life more than I can put into words. I want those same experiences, enrichments, and things to go to my children and my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They aren't things that you can buy.
They were city kids. They thrived on malls and concrete sidewalks and stuff like that, and they really knew nothing else. So it was, that part of it was, it made it a really fun thing to do for us, because their eyes were, they were, totally, enthusiastic about everything, and it just made for a really good time, good learning opportunity.
The most ardent real estate developer have a saying when they're trying to sell real estate to people, that you need to buy real estate, they're not making any more of it. I think therein lies the biggest reason for the public to retain public lands and open spaces, because they're not making any more of it.
Our land management laws and regulations and rules did not come about from the agencies, from the Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management. They came as a result of citizens forming, either as individuals or forming groups, such as the Wilderness Society and Fish and Wildlife groups and other groups, seeing things that were going on, contacted their representatives and insisted that these laws and guidelines be developed. So the management agencies are responding and restricted to those laws that have been developed as a result of public input.
Preserve them and protect them. Yeah, they're I think critical to the future of Wyoming.
I'm a conservative Republican. I'm ashamed of the Republicans who were on the platform committee at the Republican National Convention that call for the liquidation of public lands. Those are not conservative values. Those are selfish values that are being pushed by individuals who are only thinking of the short term. They're not thinking of what's best for the long term benefit of future Americans or current Americans.